Welcome, all you sluts and good girls, to the Good Girls podcast. I'm SJ, here with my co host Kay, here to answer the question of Am I a Slut on behalf of Kay. The Ethical Slut is our book of the week by Dossie, Easton, and Janet Hardy.
You definitely didn't expect Janet to write The Ethical Slut.
I did not expect Janet. Also, before we get too far into this, I had actually pulled this up because I just need you to see a picture of them. They're like old hippies, occasional lovers.
Occasional lovers. Okay, so are they bisexual or are they lesbians or is
Uh,
Janet, I'm assuming it's Janet with the short hair, non-binary?
they both use she, her pronouns. They are, I think, both pansexual, and they're both non-monogamous. But they talk a lot about how there's like different phases or something, and that there might not be one phase that's for you. I think Janet was married for a while and had a child from that marriage, and then later divorced, and then raised the child with different family units and things like that. So they talked a lot, like one of the authors says, oh, maybe you have this lifestyle where in your 20s, you're just regular slutty, where you have a series of different partners, and then you settle down for a bit when you have kids and you're maybe monogamous then. And then after your kids grow up, you start to open things up and experiment sexually when you're really confident in yourself, transitioning into
An adult
gentle
slut.
asexualness. Yes, they had new chapters added in for the modern update version of the book to bring in more perspectives from other types of individuals, especially like Black identities, and more diversity from the LGBTQIA perspective. Obviously, they are themselves queer, but more diversity within that. So they not only brought in some new perspectives, they also had a lot of those chapters read by different people so that it was clear that it wasn't just the author's own perspectives on things. But I was just a little bit delighted listening to this book narrated by like old hippies, because I feel like so many of the voices in sex positivity, sex education kind of things do come from like younger people. And so there was something both kind
They
of
look more like older academics who are researching anything else in the world besides
they
being
are like
ethically
cringy at
slutty.
times. She's like, well, if you're not ready to be his old lady, but you're just looking for a little fling, like the words that they use and stuff were delightfully cringy. So at times I was like, maybe some like modern perspectives would be helpful. But they did do more of incorporating that in. Still, like a little bit, their tone does come across as like older, your grandma lecturing you about sex stuff. But then I'm like, but this is like a cool slutty grandma. And I guess partly what made me feel cringy about it made me also kind of examine some of my own assumptions that I'm just like, oh, old people shouldn't be talking about sex. And then I'm like, no, that's actually super cool. And I'm mostly just uncomfortable with it because like I would absolutely never hear my grandmother talking about this kind of stuff, but maybe she should.
Maybe for the book to be received well, it had to be by older people who too look more like, serious academics than ethical sluts.
Well, they're also like sort of the OGs. They wrote the original book a while ago and then they've updated it since. But they're like Dossie is from the like free love era. So she's like an OG hippie. And I think that that also lends it some weight in that they are like talking about a lot of different things from their own personal perspective. So to jump in, I'm going to give you a thought exercise that they mentioned in the book to see how this hits for you. And this is basically my read of the ethical slut as a non-slutty person, or am I? We'll get into that. Um, so, Kay, as what you might consider yourself a former or current slut. So, Dossie's suggestions, picturing somebody who has a bunch of different lovers, that they're just in a non monogamous period, which for me, I was very much picturing like millennial in their 20s, that you have just like different casual relationships on different nights. She says, perhaps in doing this, you are costing yourself an opportunity for intimacy. And she says, you could increase your connection, and why not build the intimacy between you and your partners and your community by having a brunch and inviting all of your lovers to meet each other. And I'm just throwing that out there for 20-something-year-old Kay, to have a brunch with your various situationships at the time and how that would go.
I really liked a lot of my situationships in my 20s. I continued to be friends with them for a while. And so I don't personally mind it. I don't know if I would want the reverse where I am invited to their brunch with all of their situationships and partners if they were all active and current.
Yeah.
Huh, so maybe I'm being, like, two-way. I would like it, but I don't know if the individual guys would like it. They don't like to share that much, but then I'm like, "Well, I don't like to share." So if I had to actually visualize, like, all these people, um I had a situation once where I was in an open relationship. I mean, I don't know, open relationship, situationship. It wasn't like, "Oh, we are like boyfriend, girlfriend," but it is open.
We're
It was
committed to
more just
polyamory. Yeah,
no, we
exactly.
were having, like, a good time, but we both knew it, we weren't each other's ones, and it turned out that actually, like, my work best friend, her life best friend was the other person who he was hooking up with, and that created a really hard situation for her to be around the 2
Oh,
people,
yeah.
and, like, she couldn't be out with both of us at the same time, and started to feel like she was hiding something from the other friend who did want something more serious, and she's like, "The thing is that you guys would actually really, really love each other." And I feel like, honestly, like, the second that it ended, I would have been fine with that, but I never saw anything going with that situationship. So,
Yeah.
I don't know. I I'm not really giving a clear answer. I can tell you that to, like, my housewarming party when I did move in with my current husband, I had, like, my last 4 situationships all invited, and I think 3 of them showed up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right.
all
I
happy.
feel like Dossie and Janet would approve of that and your openness to considering it. So their first question in the book is who is a slut? And then they pretty much proceed to define it and say that the definition that I took away is basically anybody who's reading this book or who has like kind of a sex positive attitude is a slut. So this is both like an advantage of the book, I guess. I would say my pros for this book is it's very approachable. And I think that it is written for everyone. The cons is that it doesn't have a whole lot to say to any particular group because it seems like it's written to everyone. And this has been referred to as like the slut or polyamory Bible by people at various points. And I guess if they're like thinking of it from that perspective, that it's like little vignettes that could be like kind of applicable for anyone, but I found myself in a lot of chapters thinking like, yeah, if you wanted to get into this thing, then like you could read a whole book about that. On the other hand, it's like if you don't know where to start, and I think that maybe like who I would say this is a good book for is somebody who's like raised in a very sex negative culture and is questioning it and doesn't know where to start of like what that means. Like maybe you do still want to be monogamous, but you want to like consider it, or you want to like, you know, have your own like personal sex life more where you like masturbate more often, or like to be a full-on slut in whatever way you define that word. And the authors do use that word frequently throughout because they're about like reclaiming
The
negative
word
words.
slut, yeah.
So they use the word like it's kind of cute how they use it, and they're like an experienced slut will tell you that this blah blah blah. So anyway, um,
That.
so it was both a strength and weakness of the book that I felt like it might be a good overview, but then at sometimes it would have things in the chapters that I'm like, if you don't know this, you need to not be picking up a book about polyamory, right? Like it had like a chapter where it's like explaining to you that like gender is a social construct and and sexuality exists on a continuum and things like that. And I'm like, no, totally. Like it was a fine enough summary, but I'm like, if you're not up to speed yet that gender is non-binary, you need to be starting with a different book.
Yeah, then one that's going to get into how to be with multiple people at once and having all of your situationships at brunch with you.
Yes. And I did read about like what polyamory people on Reddit had to say about this book, at least like in a particular post where people were conversing about it. And it does seem like there's general feelings from the polyamory community that like this is not a polyamory book per se. It's just about being slutty and the many ways to do that. So like polyamory is covered, but actually the like byline of the book that says like the essential guide to like polyamory, free love, blah, 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 um, that wasn't added until the most recent edition, and, like, historically, it was just kind of more of a general book about sluthood, and then over time, because polyamory has become such a big thing, the editors seem to have, like, focused more on it being a polyamory Bible, but, like, people who are real polyamory dedicated folks seem like they're like, "Well, a lot of this is just, like, being slutty." It's like having different partners all the time. They're like, "That doesn't describe me." So again, by, like, trying to appeal to everyone, it does kind of lose some helpfulness in terms of, like, instructions for any one specific lifestyle.
Well, that's interesting because Esther Perel's Mating in Captivity, which we reviewed last week, it she also has this big, reputation, or it is one of the main things that you find that she says anything about, cheating and polyamory, when it's actually such a small part of her book and what
Yeah.
she talks about, that it's more like people are so surprised to see anything bordering acceptance in like a widely read book, that that's what they fixate on instead of like the 20 other messages. And then I say that, and like here I am, like, but tell me about what do they say? Like that is what I'm interested in.
It was, although I found myself bored by the chapters that were just like a lot of practical advice because there was a lot of things that was like, here's how you can like, we suggest trying digital calendars if you have like multiple partners so that you can all coordinate like co-parenting kids together. And it was a lot of stuff that I was like, dude, that's what two parent households also do. Like, that's not that, I don't know. It was just,
What a wide-ranging book that
it's
goes
wide
from, like,
ranging.
exploring, non-binary and gender on a continuum
Oh, and,
to
like,
also
having sex or,
sharing a
like, having an
calendar.
orgasm without, ejaculation for men, like, it's very sexually explicit, and they're very kink positive too, so it's not like they're just kind of talking about the social aspects,
But
they
then
very much talk
also
about the
Google
sexual.
calendars.
Yeah, then they're like, "Have you heard of Google Calendars?" And
That's just, like, sweet boomer woman.
it was a lot of sweet boomer woman, and when they were like, "Oh, this is now, like, updated, and we've, like, brought in a lot of perspectives from young people and, like, millennials," and they're, like, definitely doing that boomer thing where they still think of millennials as young people, and I'm like, "We talked to s" I mean, maybe they did talk to Gen Z people, and the editor just put the thing about millennials on the back, but I'm
We're,
like,
like,
"Yo,
40,
we're
guys.
not young, but thank you for thinking of us as young." Um so, and actually, my read on it was more from like, I did take away a surprising amount from this as a monogamous person who I would say, like, all things considered, especially when I read some of what they write, I'm like, no, I'm pretty vanilla. Um, so one was that it was helpful to have some perspective that they were like, if you I I mean, they don't seem like they get monogamy, obviously, but they don't have a problem with it. So they'll say stuff like, you can come to that conclusion that that's for you, but do some kind of exercise where you sit and if you thought about like all of the different arrangements and lifestyles were all equally socially accepted, would you pick monogamy? And I thought like that's really helpful to look because if you're just doing something because you're just like completely unexamined about it, it felt a lot like having a religious identity, and just having it because that's what your parents had always raised you in, and like being the type of religious person who's like, oh, I would never like read a text from another religion or study another religion. And it's like, why? Because if yours really works for you, then like you should be really comfortable learning things from other religions because you would come back to yours even if you had other options. And if the only reason you're doing it is because you view that as the only acceptable option, like maybe you need to reconsider.
And not exactly how Esther Perel put it in Mating in Captivity, but she did say somewhat similar things like, in all other situations in life, we accept that we are not the only one and there is not only
Hmm.
one person. Like, you would never say, like, oh, you're only going to have one friend who does this. We accept that there's multiple others and that, we're kind of orbits and we're going to change our orbit sometimes and people are going to
Yeah.
hang out with us during that time and we might come back to the other friends, but we do not accept that in partners. And it is the one thing that if somebody does, then we see like, yes, like the marriage is over when this happens,
Yeah.
even like compared to other transgressions. So I don't know. I don't like, again, I don't think it's for me. I think that the reasons why I would continue coming back to it is because there's this sense of like stability and that this person is there for you and all that, that like, I don't know. It's just not even something. Also,
I didn't walk away from this book thinking, "Oh, I feel like I'm missing something by not exploring non-monogamy." Um, but I did walk away with a lot of, like, thoughtful things about my own relationships. Um, and so I felt like so one of the things when they're like, "Oh, who is a slut?" And they're like, "Oh, anybody who wants, like you want lots of warm friendships." And I was like, "I feel like some of my friends would be uncomfortable if they knew that I'm reading a book called The Ethical Slut to think about how to have more intimate friendships with my
warm
friends."
friendships.
Right, and it's, like, sometimes problematic how they, like, blur a lot of lines in this book, and sometimes that's really helpful because things are not binary, like, it's not, like, man, woman, like, married to this person, not married to this person. Um, But, like, sometimes some of the lines that they were blurring when they were like, "Oh, well, like, what is having sex?" I would argue that I'm having sex with you right now. And she was kind of like, "Because, like, you can't draw the line for sex at genital penetration and people have non-genital sex," then she's like, "So where do you draw the line? So therefore there is no line." So she's like, "I really think that, like, any warm interaction is sex." And I'm like, again, no
Nah, there's
consent part. So I feel like
yeah.
if your friend knew that you're sitting together at the pool chatting and you're like, "Oh, that was some good sex,"
Yeah, it's
like,
like there's an intention for, like, arousal and mutual sexual satisfaction, whether or not that it results in an orgasm. Yeah.
yeah, there has
Yeah.
to be a little bit more of a line than that. And so, like, sometimes they don't really draw these lines. But I did feel like so there's this part in it, and they talk a lot about, like, kind of friendships, and it's similar to the thing that Esther Perel has that's like, why do you have such a strong line between what your expectations are and your mutual expectations from somebody that you're in a paired relationship with versus friends? And so it did make me consider a lot about how we do have, like, social norms about how you would, like, make commitments with, like, put names on the relationship, things like that for, like, a lover of some sort. But, like, we don't do that with friends and, like, why we have sort of, like, a social fear around, like, saying to a friend like, being intimate with a friend and not sexually, although obviously lots of us fuck our friends. But I liked the part about thinking of, like, intimacy with friends that she's kind of like, "Why don't you, like, have relationship conversations with your friends where you, like, name what the relationship is and, like, how they mean to you?" And so, like, not don't worry, Kay, I see your face. I'm not gonna make
We
us
don't
sit
need to
down
put a label on
we
this.
don't have to sit down and have the talk, right? Like, it is so uncomfortable, but I was like, at the same time, it's like you have so many people in like, I know you and I love that we live in such a tight-knit community, but, like, it seems so weird, and I know by your face that you agree,
Well,
to,
I'm
like,
just thinking
be like,
about, like
"What are
yeah.
we as friends?" But at the same
Well,
time, you do
imagine,
kind of have
like
mutual expectations, but you just, like, they aren't explicit.
but you label your friends you're not as close with, like, "You're my casual friend." Like,
Yeah.
I am not in a committed relationship with you, but we will you might get a "you up" text from me or, like, whatever the equivalent of that is. Like, none of my other friends are available, my kids are out of town, so do you wanna grab a coffee?
It is so true, right? Like, in so many ways, friendships are similar to, like, romantic or, like, sexual relationships other than the, like, sex part and the, like, mutual that there's any, like, discussion of mutual expectations. But it is so funny because, like, you think about it or discussions of, like, oh, making new friends as adults feels like dating because 'cause you're like, "Oh, like, I met somebody at school pickup, and she seems really nice, but I don't know if she thinks of me that way, and I, like, texted her to see if she wanted to, like, get coffee sometime, but
And
is
then
that
you're
too
stuck in a
forward?"
miscommunication trope where you both really wanna be friends, but neither of you guys wants to be too forward, and so because of this miscommunication, you end up never even
Yes.
being friends.
All right, well, I wanna have a whole episode about that because I feel like that happens all the time with friendships, and then I am like, "Oh, well, yeah, I don't wanna, like, be too forward," and then I feel like maybe I'm missing out on opportunities even though I'm like, "I really like that person, and she seems cool," but, like, she probably doesn't think that I'm cool.
Or she probably has her cup full with friends, so she doesn't need me, even though that friend actually hasn't done anything in the last
Yeah.
5 weekends because everybody thinks that about her, but then she doesn't have
And, like, I feel like Dossie and Janet would have a lot to say to you because they have a lot about, like, being right with yourself before you can go be with others. And so, like, a lot of things about, like, oh, talk positively to yourself or, like, don't have a negative idea that it's like, "Oh, people couldn't possibly like me because I don't like me." It's like you go in with, like, sort of a positive, open-minded expectation that you're just like, "I like myself, so other people will like me, and I will offer things to them, and if they say no, then I'm like, "Okay, thanks for thinking of me."
Yeah, I still think I'm wonderful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So, in that regard, I feel like a monogamous person who isn't looking for, like, any of the things in, like, the book's byline, like, you're not looking to open up your marriage necessarily, you're not, like, looking to be polyamorous, you could still get a lot out of it. I mean, there's, like, great chapters on, like I wouldn't say they're great chapters. Again, they're, like, little micro things that it's like, if you needed to work on this, there are whole books. Like, their chapter about conflict resolution was fine, but I've been to a whole course about conflict management, so I was like, "Eh." But the jealousy chapter was good, and it's like anybody could work on jealousy. And it doesn't have to mean that because you're jealous because your partner dates other people every other weekend or something. And similarly, that they talked about pleasure a lot, and that pleasure can be an end in its own right. And just being in a sex negative culture, I think like a lot of things that we frequently talk about on the podcast, just in terms of like being comfortable finding out what you want, knowing what you want, telling somebody that that's what you want, being comfortable redirecting if it's not what you want or if you change your mind.
Yeah, and this is a sidebar, but when I think about ways to justify staying in a relationship with one partner, that is one of the things is that I can't imagine having better sex outside of my partner because of the level of openness and trust
Mm,
and like requests to turn things around, all that,
yeah.
that I don't know. Anyways, sidebar though. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's part of it, right? Is like learning what you actually want. And so I think for people who value novelty more versus people who value stability or somebody who knows them really well, that the kind of that those are all things
Well,
that you should
that's
take into consideration for yourself.
and I think, like, not to keep on referring back, like, I think in Esther Perel's Mating in Captivity, she talks about how, like, that novelty and that uncertainty at the beginning of the relationship is what leads to, like, really high lust and all that. But that would basically put you in, like, this endless trap of, like, always wanting somebody
Hmm.
like, if that is what you're chasing, then that's not just, like, bringing in another person or 2 or 3 because, like, they
Yeah.
will also have their newness wear off. It's like bringing in, constant new people and then
Which is one of the options in the book, like, right, they leave it open to all options, like, people who are in, like, committed long-term polycules, people who stay in their committed relationship, but they have, like, some sort of arrangement where one or both partners gets to, like, do certain things outside of the relationship, and so there is a lot of the book that's, like, practical advice for how to set up those boundaries and come up with an agreement about what works for you, which was interesting to listen to, but it basically made me think, I'm glad that I am somebody who's perfectly happy in my boring ass
I'm glad
one-person
that my
relation
brain
two-person
tends
relationship.
towards, like, monogamy.
Because I was like, dude, I feel like it's so fucking complicated to have like one like romantic partner, life partner relationship. You might be like, oh, you have your primary life partner, and then you have other people that you go to for other things. And like you may have more of like hierarchical relationships. And then you might have many partnered relationships that are somewhat on the same level. But I was just like, if I had more time, I would invest more into my current primary relationship. Like, we would go on dates more, and I can't even keep up with that, and, like, having a kids and having a job, I'm like, "Who are these people with this much energy that they're like, I just like meeting new people at a sex club and fucking them and
That's
stuff," and I'm like, "Wow, you must have a flexible work schedule."
so Cam Winter, he's the lead singer, lead person for the band Goose, which is supposed to be Gen X's first major rock band.
I've
He
heard of
briefly
them.
dated Olivia Rodrigo, which is
That's why I
embarrassing
know
for
I think I
myself.
only
The
know
only
about them from
reason
you.
yeah, yeah, I was gonna say you probably only know through me because I don't think any other, mil upper age millennial, which I guess you and I are, cares about Olivia Rodrigo to my extent. But anyways, his mom is in a polycule or not a polycule, but she does
She's open in some way.
it is a
She's some sort of
polycule,
slut.
yes, and it was when
Oh,
her
yeah,
kids
you
were
know
in
what she
high
is.
school
Yeah.
that she started doing that. So I do think it's, like, a significant amount of extra time that is not accessible if you lost
That was their point in their, like, suggestion of, like, what some people's ideal life arc might be is that you might be, like, less slutty while you have kids, or be in at least, like, more of a committed thing, even if it is, like, a multi-person household, that is, like, involved with each other in different ways, but that you wouldn't just be, like, cruising out on the town quite so much, and in fact, Janet Hardy was writing under pen names for many of her earlier years of authoring, and it was because she had children that she was raising, and she was like, "I'm not sure how they would feel about, like, their mom's name being all over these, like, kink and
my
sex
mom's a
books."
slut, yeah.
Yeah, so she's like, "To protect my children," but she says, "Now that my children are grown and I'm, like, fully out to them about, like, what I do," then she now writes under her name and has, like, reassumed ownership of, like, her previous works. So,
Very cool.
um, yeah, but I did like there was one quote in there where she was, first she was just like, "Oh, like, love is infinite. People think that it's finite and you have to divide it up," which I'm like, but then she gets to, "But your time and your resources are not, so, like, that is your limitation." And she's like, "Even the, like, sluttiest slut is only has so many hours in the day." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's kind of my on one of my fundamental issues of why as much as I feel like I have dismantled a lot of my like cultural assumptions. I'm just like that all these things and it's like you have to have, covenant discussions with the partners about like what the boundaries are and then revisit them when you have jealousy and things like that. And I'm like, or I could just have sex with the same person for the rest of my life. And I'm
Yeah.
frankly okay with that. And I recognize everyone is not. And so I love that there are resources out there for them. And I also feel great that I thought about it and made sure that that was also me, but I was just like, I don't know, that sounds like a lot of work. Um, so yeah, within the pleasure discussion, I said that she also had some helpful inputs of even if you are straight, more like vanilla kind of person, things that you can learn from other sexual identities that can make you rethink about how you think about pleasure and sex. And so she had some good examples of like that there's different power dynamics between queer couples when you don't have like the traditional gender dynamics and how you can learn from that. Lesbians dispelling the myth of like the simultaneous orgasm being the be all and end all. And she talks about this dance club called Omni that one of the authors used to frequent that was like a queer dance club and it was just like you had no way of knowing like what somebody's gender was or what they were packing in their pants based on how they looked on the outside. So she's like it was very good for like conversation and consent because there was no like assumption that I'm a man hitting on a woman and so I can hit on them. So, she had a lot of like helpful things to think about. At the same time, I felt like
It would make sense to me that we could all learn something from lesbians about the female orgasm since
that
they
too.
are very concentrated on, yeah.
That's true. I don't want to read any advice from men about giving a woman an orgasm. I only want to have advice from a woman who has sex with other women. At the same time, it was a little oversimplified. Like she said something, they say something kind of like, oh, like gay men don't really have like inherent power dynamics in their relationships because they're both men. But I was like, you guys wrote a whole book about tops and bottoms. Like I would think that just because there isn't inherent gender roles doesn't mean that there's like inherent power dynamics. So that was oversimplified.
Yeah, there is always power dynamics,
Right.
yeah.
And then like just sort of this attitude that was like, and this is throughout the book, is that anything that bucks tradition and social and societal norms is by definition good because it's like pushing outside. And so this runs into problems several times, which we will get to. There's this quote: "Imagine how you could feel if you had boundless sex and love. Imagine how strong your love muscles would be if you got to exercise them all
I
the
love the
time."
love muscles.
The love muscle. I know they're just like such darling old hippie things. But again, they don't draw a line between love that like includes an erotic or sexual component because I'm like, I do feel like I exercise my love muscles. That sounds creepy all the time. But like I love people a lot, but I'm only having sex with one of them. And I don't feel like anything is lacking. It seems like they feel like, oh, if you're in a more traditional kind of lifestyle, you're not able to like experience boundless love or express it. And I'm like, maybe we're just like expressing it in different ways that I don't have to like fuck everybody that I feel a strong attachment to.
Yeah, I feel no my love muscles are, like, really heavily exercised with my one partner.
Sometimes his love muscle needs a break after all of that. Okay, so let's move to my actual issues with the book. The first one that I noticed right away, they had a chapter on consent. But I feel like because they were both coming from this hippie free love kind of vibe, that they didn't have a good understanding of where a lot of women come from when we are generally, the thing of like you just go into a coffee shop and you have your headphones on and you get annoyed if a man talks to you because you clearly have your headphones on. I feel like Dossie and Janet would be annoyed with that energy because they'd be like, put yourself out there, like go to a sex club, like have some random sex. And so like they want you to be really like upbeat and sex positive and cheerful, but to me sometimes that felt like to the detriment of feeling like consent is a real thing and why it matters so much to like women and queer people and like other folks for whom like consent has not always been something that we get to give. So like a lot of times when they have this chapter on consent, she's like, a simple no thank you will suffice. Well, if you give a no thank you, and I'm like, no,
Mm,
consent is like no, or you mean like
it's being asked and yes, and
or also, like, a lot of
uh,
stuff that I remember, like, reading when I was, like, taking classes about such thing is consent is also lack of an enthusiastic yes. So it doesn't even need to have, like, a no or let alone a no thank you. I think because they spend so much time around their sex positive little community of people, they forget what the, like, outside world is like. And I'm like, oh, then they talk about kind of like gender roles, which I assume in this case they're mostly talking about them in like a cis hetero kind of capacity, but they're like basically in consent that like both men and women need to like unlearn their traditional roles. So like men need to not be like so aggressive and they need to learn to take no for an answer. Like, okay, fine. Um, but then that's like also at the same time like women need to change and they're like women need to learn to like not be passive, to just be like waiting to be swept off your feet by your Prince Charming. And like, like they kind of describe it as like being coquettish or playing hard to get. And I'm like, none of these terms or descriptions sound like things that are happening in the modern
Yeah,
dating
it just
world.
doesn't resonate.
It doesn't. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, I feel like they should have interviewed some like currently single, like under 40 women for this, of just like the majority of experiences with men when you're in a place where like single people could be meeting, which apparently includes the gym and LinkedIn and places that you just want to be left alone. Um, that it's just like, no, we're just tired of like aggressive men. We're tired with like the current mode of men. And so, like, yeah, our default is that we're always swatting things down. And like, sure, Dossie, I'd love to live in a world where I could just be
No,
like,
thank you.
free love, like maybe not tonight, but tomorrow.
Yeah,
And
but the enthusiasm, woo.
yes. And then, like, similarly with the consent stuff, because they're so like fuzzy about like what the lines are about things. And they have a chapter on child rearing in your like group home situation, like whatever you're in. I felt like, again, it was, like, overly casual that they're like, "Oh, like, on nudity, like, you might have partners that feel very differently about, like, being nude around people, but just make sure that you don't expect, like, kids to be nude around other people, but, like, if you or your partners are, like, people who are comfortable being naked around the house, then that's your own personal decision to make, but your kids, as they get older, might have, like, feedback." But I'm just picturing, like, your hippie mom, and she just has, like, a series of lovers over, and they're just, like, strolling around naked because that's their thing.
Oh gosh, no thank
I
you.
was just like,
Yeah.
I feel like I would put such strong I mean, I'm not saying that you couldn't raise children in, like, a non-monogamous atmosphere, but I would have very strong boundaries on it, and they just kinda seemed like they're like, "Yeah, whatever works for you," like, different people, and I do feel like I'm not being prudish when I say, for example, like, I am a naked mom, like, my kids definitely see me
That's
naked.
my kids have definitely seen me naked, but there's
I'm not
something different
striding
between
around
me
my
and
house naked, but, like, they can come into my room while I'm getting dressed, and I will be in there naked.
but if I had varying
But
partners.
I do feel, yeah, like, I feel like I'm not being a prude when I say that, like, I feel like it would be different if I had even, like, you know, a boyfriend or even, like, their stepfather who wasn't gonna it's just like if they're not
Them being naked around the kid is also just a weird
yeah,
dynamic.
and the
Yeah.
fact that they were like, "Oh, like, don't have the kids be naked around people," but, like, the adults, it's, like, more of a I'm like, "No, I think that it's just, like, one of those things." It's like touching people at the office. It's like, maybe there is an appropriate way to, like, hug people in the office, but if you're not sure, just default towards don't touch anybody at work ever. Don't be naked around people that you're not having sex with or, like, intending to have sex with. Like, there was some weirdness about that, that I'm like, I would dearly love to interview, like, their adult children or other, like, adult children of, like, old free love hippies and be like, "How do you feel
Just
about
like, what if,
this?"
like, a naked man picked up your daughter? Like, you'd probably be like, "Nah, it doesn't matter that she's not naked. Please put her down."
Yeah, and I'm not critiquing anything about the lifestyle writ large, but they're like, "Oh, children raised in, like, poly lifestyles are, like, raised to be just as happy and, like, functional as kids raised in monogamous households or perhaps even more." And I'm like, "I don't know, maybe, sure, but that's not based on any data." And I'm also like, there have
Perhaps
been
even more. Like, why is that
yeah, there have
even?
been, like,
Yeah.
free love hippies around for long enough that they do have adult children now, but I'm like, maybe you should have an updated section where you interview your kids or the kids of your friends and say, like, "Hey, you didn't really get, like, a say in, like, what kinda lifestyle your parents had. Nobody does, but, like, how do you feel about it? And do you wish that there were, like, fewer naked men strolling around your mom's house?" I don't know. Um
Perhaps even more wasn't necessary.
Yeah. And again, it's like their whole kind of bias towards like they want to be like pro, non-traditional things, but they do it to an extent that they're kind of like, oh, it's even better. And I'm like, no, I just want to be to a point where we're like, all of these options are on
It's
the
not
table.
negative.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
they have like their own pros and cons. So similarly, they kind of talk about how like non-traditional groupings of people, like sexual lifestyles have existed throughout history. And they list a bunch of them. They go on vignettes where they'll talk about like historic groups. A thing that bothered me about it is that they did just like present it in this way that is like, oh, they're all equal. Like they're all great because they were all like people bucking tradition. So like they'll mention polygamy and Mormon culture in the same way that they mention like tantric sex practices and stuff. And I'm like, again,
Different.
yeah, and like power dynamic. It wasn't like they were just like,
Yeah, that
like Joseph Smith and his wives of however many he had were just like a bunch of like free love and sexy people that all decided to like form a household together. Like there is such a inherent gender dynamic in it when you have a society where like men can have multiple wives, but wives can't have women can't have multiple husbands.
yeah, Brigham Young is not a man to look up for with, great sex.
Yeah, exactly. And like I feel like they're just like having sex through a hole in the sheet or whatever. Like it's not who you would look to for like yeah, fun
Not
tips on free
slutty.
love. Um so they mentioned a lot of the like historical like different societies that sort of existed or cults, which they never refer to any of them as cult. But she mentions one of their little vignettes is Rajneeshpuram. Does that name ring a bell for you in Oregon? It was like a commune in
No.
Oregon.
I
Or did you watch Wild
perhaps
Wild Country?
I think that I saw, like, the Netflix document.
Yes, there was a net so she's talking about it in this completely like, "It was so cool, like, this was just this community that believed in free love and, like, practiced tantric sex with one another, and so they, like, formed a whole village so that they could be, like, free around each other." Girl, you are talking about the cult that, like and I get that there is, like, some two-sidedness that I'm sure like, when you watch the documentary, you're also, like, the people who lived around them were also, like, not welcoming and but I mean, they kinda have reasons not to be in that they're, like, a little bit religiously, I don't know what you'd say, like, they're a little religiously conservative. But at the same time, they were like a full-on cult. Um, they famously orchestrated a bioterrorism attack where they took control of their land by winning elections. And so, like in one case, they put salmonella in salad bars of 10 restaurants around the area to like make people sick before the election so that they wouldn't show up to vote. 700 people got sick. And it did not work out for them because people were so pissed when they found out about this that they like all went to the polls in like greater numbers. I, like, read into them more because I hadn't watched the documentary in a while. They bust in homeless people to get votes, and then they would sometimes, like, drug them to keep them calm so that they could just get them to vote and then, like, kick them out afterwards.
Right, but
Um
they were having great sex.
I guess so, which includes with children because there was, like, widespread
Uh,
reports of sexual abuse of children, and again, like, some of these things, I'm like, I want them to write more responsibly about boundaries because I feel like when there are people who are like, "Oh, free love," like, there's no boundaries on, like, who I love and when, it is very hard to then believe that people are like, "Oh, but if the person's under 18, then, like, suddenly I have, like, really strong boundaries in place." Especially, like, when the way that they talk about it in the book is so casual, and they talk about this community as just being like, "It was so great," and, like, they were so exploratory, but the teachings of the guy who was, like, the leader of the cult designates the ages of 7 to 14 as prime periods of sexual experimenting and understanding.
oh, that's so yuck. So,
Yeah.
so, so,
But
so
again,
yuck.
they just have a little vignette where they're like, "This was a cool thing. This was a cool thing." And then, yeah, like a
They
couple
should at
of
least say, like, "This aspect could have been cool if not done in a cult setting." Oh,
right,
yeah.
like to say like it's so hard because our society is so repressed. It's so hard to find people who are willing to be sexually exploratory and like get a community of them so that you can be out and be around people like you, but not also have that like I think that somehow it does tend to intermix with the people who are into like cults and having like
Uh,
a culty leader who gives you directives about having sex with 7-year-olds and things like that.
Not good.
Yeah.
Yuck.
So a couple other things that were just like less problematic. That was definitely my biggest problematic one. I did kind of want to go and Google every like free love cult that they mention in the book to find out more about them, but not in a like a, I want to repeat this way, more like in a oh, that's weird that
Are
you
all
mentioned
the
that
other
way.
ones problematic? Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so definitely notice that. One reviewer also pointed this out that they equate having physical standards as shallow. And they're very much just like, oh, like every aspect of the human body is beautiful. And like, if you feel like you don't want to have sex with somebody just because they like don't meet your sexual attractiveness standards, then like, here's an exercise that you can do on like how to open up your mind. And I'm like, again,
It's alright if you're not physically
you can just
attracted to
not have
someone.
sex with everyone, and as long as there are, like, enough people that you find attractive that you can have, like, the amount of sex that you want and need, we don't need to all find each other sexually attractive. When a reviewer that I read suggested that maybe this, like, kind of happens because, like, if you're in, like, a kink community or, like, just sort of sexually non-traditional, that's a much smaller group of people, especially if you're in a smaller town, and so it might be by necessity that they're kind of saying, like, hey, if you're like, poly or slutty, not everyone, especially not in the way of like, oh, you're like 20 and you're just dating around and like having various situationships.
But
But I
more
think,
like you're 45 or
yeah,
50.
you're like 50
Yeah.
and and you're going to like sex parties. Like, you're not going to find a bunch of people who look like models like the TV shows promise. I do remember one of those TLC reality shows where they follow different like My Weird Relationship or something like that, and there was one where it was like a younger couple was wanting to explore having an open marriage and went to a sex party, and everybody there was, like,
50s,
55
yeah.
and, like
Overweight a bit.
yeah, like, just not they just looked like typical, like, random
A
people
lot
in
of them
their
are also wearing, like,
mid-50s.
masks, which, we understand why.
And again, it's
But
not like a 50 Shades of Grey kind of situation. So in that way, I was like, maybe the authors are just trying to gently prepare you for like, it's going to be a smaller community to pick from if you want to do some of these things. And like, you have to be open minded because they say to like, for example, go to a nude beach and like prepare yourself with like the reality of like what the human body really looks like. And I'm like, you mean the human body at nude beaches? Because I feel like, again, nude beaches in the US anyway tend to really be frequented by, like, middle-aged men.
yeah. So, yeah, rolls and small little penises hidden within the
Yeah.
rolls.
Yeah, and then the final one that a lot of people have pointed out is they have a very casual attitude about cheating. I mean, they do say that it's wrong, but I feel like it's similar a little bit maybe to Esther. They don't come down on it quite as hard as you would expect, and they're more just like, "Well, like, 50% of relationships, somebody cheats, so, like, this is why we think that people should have more options to have open marriages." And if that happens to you, like, obviously, that really sucks, and you have to decide what to do with it, but they don't come down so hard to just be like, look, if you're the person who wants to cheat, like if you're the person who wants to open up the marriage, it is your responsibility to communicate to your partner before you feel like you have to cheat. And if then the choice is yours, that if your partner doesn't want to open up the marriage, that you have the decision to make of whether you want to like continue in a marriage, not being able to do what you want, or like leave, but that decision has to rest on you and not like the unknowing partner.
I don't think that either Esther or these authors were condoning the idea of sex outside the marriage, but I do think that Esther pretty firmly said to him, it has to be communicated and all that. Her thing was more like in the fallout, why do we think that it's better to like break the institution and the structure of your marriage rather than like try to work through that
Oh,
cheating
okay. Yeah.
episode?
Yeah, which is like I can't weigh in on, and I think that that's different for every relationship. But even like they're like, oh, and advice to you, like if you were the one who was cheated on, they're like, obviously, like you have to decide what to do next, but you didn't do anything wrong other than like maybe clinging to the fairy tale about happy ever after. And I'm like, no, but you just had before that like a whole
And you just said
chapter.
half of people don't cheat, so that's actually a pretty decent chunk.
Yeah, and it's like they had a chapter earlier in the book that is about like agreements between people, and they're very specifically like, you can change your agreements over time. You should like sit down and have like talked out agreements, but you can't have it just be like, well, you didn't tell me that I couldn't do this thing. And so, like, anything that's not forbidden is permitted. They're like, you have to follow the spirit of your agreement as well as like the letter of it. So, and also, I feel like that's like pretty much built into like marriages is the assumption that you're not going to cheat. So, like, the idea that like it is a problem at all that you, as the cheated upon party, were like, "Oh, that was, like, very silly of you to cling to this, like, myth and fairy tale about monogamy," is like, "No, that was actually a pretty reasonable assumption. Because again, like, that's on your partner to discuss that with you. And it's like Rich and Stoya write the How to Do It column in Slate, which is a really good one that I like in terms of like it's sex positive, kink positive, like talks about a lot of different like sexual health and how to do it type of stuff. And I really appreciate that that is a perspective that is like open-minded, like pro poly, anything like that, pro slut, and is very anti-cheating. And they're just like, there's never an excuse. Cause again, like if you feel like you're in a monogamous
Have a
relationship and it's
conversation.
not worth it and it's not working for you, like you have the conversation. They're like, that is a cop out to just be like, oh, I'll just like have my cake and eat it too. And so I think that there are a lot of ways to come down on cheating and still be like as pro slut as you want, especially when the book is called The Ethical Slut.
Yeah. So interesting. I don't think that I necessarily relate to the authors as much as I thought that I might, just based off of like only what I knew about it.
Yeah.
But fun to know their views.
Fun to know their views and like fun to have a little bit of thoughts about the variety of relationships in your life, what you want from them, what you like and how to advocate for that both in romantic or sexual relationships and like just in your relationships in general in life. But again, for those pieces about like how to navigate jealousy, how to have conflicts better, there are also a ton of books out there that specifically focus on those topics written by subject matter experts. So this book certainly has a further reading list, but I also feel like there's probably topical books that you could get for any of these things. So I'm not sure that there's a lot of people that I would recommend this to, because again, if you're so beginner level that you're like needing some of these introductions into like oh, why are these cultural myths so persistent? And like, there might be some other work that you need to do first. And then if you are to the level where you're like wanting to explore a particular slutty lifestyle, um, there are also like more targeted books for that that I think are a little bit more updated. But I did delight in hearing from the elders. Um,
Yeah. I would say fun to read, but don't take it as a how to guide.
Yeah, or just listen to this episode and you've pretty much learned everything you need to know. And if you need some of the other stuff, which they include like the differences between different kinds of protection for safe sex, I was like, you really need to like watch some other videos before you get to the point of like thinking about how to have a series of multiple partners. But then again, our sex ed system in America lets us down all the time. So if this is where it left you, I'm glad that you can find information about what a condom is from Dossie and Janet.
Well, I see that on wrapping up, we have something about an 1848 community.
Okay, this is just a quick one. This is another one of their like fun sex positive communities, the Oneida community in New York. Um, so they're like ultra Christian and they're like the kind of a weird branch of Christian that basically believes that like Jesus already came again. And so like we are living in the like reign of the Messiah. So it is possible to be perfect and you just need to try harder. So they're like very like ultra particular brand of religion for that time. But their pastor, John Humphrey Noyes, somehow discovers how to have an orgasm without ejaculating, which is something that he does when he is realizes that it's really hard on his wife to get her pregnant all the time because she has some tough pregnancies. But he
Kind of
really likes
him.
sex. So he figures out how to the orgasm without ejaculating. Cool. But this guy decides that it's a spiritual practice, build an entire commune around this idea with that being like one of the core ideas. It's called like stripulation or something like that. And there's a 90-bedroom mansion that like all these families live in. They build a whole community. Like they're originally supposed to be sort of like anti-industrialist because this is like in the time of the Industrial Revolution. They end up um, actually, like, building up all their own industry so that they can be self-sufficient, which I feel like is where most communes end up. They're like, "Oh, we're anti-industrialists," and then they're like, "Oh, we need stuff. We have to make it if we don't buy it." Um, so they end up making the Oneida silverware, which, like, you have probably seen that silverware brand before, is from Oneida, New York, and it is, like, was originated with this
Oh,
sex commune.
go Oneida.
And compared to the Rajneesh group, this does have more fun parts. Like the women were very liberated. They wore like pantaloons and shorter skirts, and they could like have a lot of choice in like their sexual partners. They were opposed to monogamous relationships, and you couldn't have exclusive relationships. They Noyes actually also coined the term free love, they think. So basically, anybody could have sex with anybody who consented within their community. Um, there is some weird stuff, of course. I read that this is not mentioned in their book, but women over 40 were to act as sexual mentors to adolescent boys because they had a minimal chance of conceiving. And then they became the religious role models, and I was like, "This sounds like a smut book." I mean, obviously, the boy would have to be barely legal, even for the smuttiest of smut, but, like, an 18-year-old
I'm
boy.
just trying to imagine like an late 1800s, like smelly woman with like, yellow rotting teeth being like,
Yeah.
come here.
Let me sh let me
Wheeling
show
him.
you the way around
Yeah.
the vagina.
Yeah. By like
Teaching him how
sagging
to
old
teaching him
lady.
how to orgasm without ejaculating. Yeah. Well, thank you. As a woman over 40K, I am a little bit but they didn't have dental work back then, it's true. Yeah, so anyway, I do think that this is a good setup for some smut in a woman that runs a school for 18-year-old barely legal boys and teaching them the ways of the jizzless orgasm. But
Wow.
then they do mention one downside. They do deign for this one to mention that he dabbled a bit in eugenics. Oops. But that's really the only negative thing that they mention, and they're just
Just a
like,
little bit of eugenics.
whoops, that'll happen to the best of us in 1848. But
At the woman, they wore pants.
women got to wear pants and be sex mentors for teenagers. So yeah, the mansion is still there in Oneida. So if you want to visit a 90-some bedroom sex mansion in New York, you are
Just
mere
have
hours
some
away.
orgasmless sex with your husband.
Or you can just have orgasmless. No, it's orgasm. It's orgasmic sex. It's jizzless sex.
Oh,
They orgasm, but there is, I know I wrote that down wrong in my notes, but it is
useless
the
sex.
man orgasms, but there's no ejaculation.
Fascinating.
Which is a thing that they talk a lot about in the book in general, because that can be a way to, like, have more partners, and because then you can have multiple orgasms because you haven't blown your load.
Huh.
So, if you want to celebrate in your own home and you're not conveniently located close to Oneida, you can just practice stripulation. I wanna say it's called stripulation, in your own home.
I'll think about it, but maybe pass. It's unusual for me. Well, thank you for listening, sluts.
I hope you learned so much today.